Hey everybody, it's Ecap here, and in this video I'm going to be doing a talent comparison for Ret Paladins. We're going to be talking about Avenging Wrath Might versus Crusade, and this talent node choice, and why Might is kind of the superior pick in PvE content, and also why Crusade can have some niche uses as well, and I'll give you examples of those. So what inspired me to even do this video is in PvP setting, you see some Ret Paladins using Crusade. This is likely because PvP is a lot different than PvE, right? So PvP, you want to a lot of times have a lot of damage for a go when the enemy team is vulnerable, and Crusade on a single use is stronger than Might, right? It's a 1 minute cooldown versus a 2 minute cooldown. If you sim it out, whatever, Crusade is stronger than Might on a one term use. However, in PvE combat, it's about doing damage over the course of a fight for the most part, right? Or the course of a dungeon and Mythic Plus. And so after that first use plays out, you're going to then, for the rest of that time, whether that's a 30-minute dungeon or a 5 or 6 minute raid fight, you're going to then get more uses of your Avenging Wrath Might. And Crusade is not good enough by enough to overtake that from Might at any point, even if it's as close as it can get for uses. Like the Might's going to have more, and it's close enough to the same power that the Might is going to do more damage. Now, why is that? Well, one, just because of tuning, of course. Tuning's always a key. Like, they could tune Crusade to be stronger if they really wanted to, of course. And then it's also because of the way Ret Paladin is baked into a single target build in PvE, at least with Execution Sentence. Having that for every other Execution Sentence, having your Avenging Wrath Might also enhances that ability. With Crusade, you're having a 30-second non-powered ES, a 1 minute unpowered ES, and a 130 empowered ES. So you have 3 non-powered ESs in between instead of only 1. So that's another reason why. So your Execution Sentence talent is not as good when you're not using Might. And so that's like a stark difference there. Now, some of this stuff might be natural or whatever to think, but it's worth talking about, I think, because whether they're going to tune it someday, whether they're going to make it more useful for certain situations to change your talents, I do think it's a little bit cookie cutter and boring, some of the talents right now. Like the big debate for a while was, and I did a video on this, Crusading Strikes versus Templar Strikes. Crusading Strikes is just winning out, and it's going to continue winning out without any tuning over the course of the expansion. It's a talent that actually has some scaling with it, even if it's low, and it will win out over the course of this expansion with no changes. And so that was kind of like a debate, but it's pretty much cookie cutter build for the most part. Some people swap out a few talents here or there for sure. I've seen, you see a random different build, but it's mostly the same thing. And so to make Crusade good, it would have to be really strong, right? And the issue with that, and by really strong, I mean like a really strong, at least as strong as like a 3 minute cooldown. And I think that's why they initially had it as a 3 minute cooldown. But then it would have to be even stronger than that, because now you're having even more non-empowered Execution Sentences. And you get to this really hard thing, because if Crusade is already very strong for a cooldown, right? For a 2 minute cooldown for single use is quite strong. It's not weak at all. So to make that even stronger, you're making it very awkward as far as burst damage goes for Ret. Now that's an issue for PvP, and they could tune it separately for PvP, but it can also be an issue for PvE, like when a boss has a phase where they take extra damage or something like that, right? Having a Ret Paladin be able to have this cooldown that's like a 2 minute cooldown, but it has like the power of like a 4 minute cooldown, that's like just extremely powerful, right? Like there's no way around that. And that's kind of the issue I think that they've kind of painted themselves in with this. Now, of course, during the beta, what I was just really calling for was just combining Might and Crusade into one thing, right? And whether that's a 2 minute cooldown or a 3 minute cooldown, whatever, but just having this be one button, not a choice, because I did see this happening where this wasn't going to be a choice. Mythic Plus is a unique opportunity, though, because Mythic Plus is dynamic, and you could, in theory, make use of Crusade. There is one, and I use this in one of my guides at least. It might have been 10.0. I don't know if it's 10.0 or 10.1. But there is an instance where Crusade would actually be quite good. And where Crusade would be good is in an instance where, like this back half of Talzavesh, so the second part of the Talzavesh dungeon, that Mythic Plus. So you have the first Mythic Plus where you're inside, and the second one where you're outside. You go through the Murloc area, and then the Pirate area, and then the final area. Well, that Murloc area where you pull, generally speaking, especially in higher end groups, you're pulling a very large percent of your trash there. So you're going to be doing a very large percent of your total dungeon damage. Like your total dungeon damage for that dungeon can be done in one pull essentially. And for that, Crusade would actually be probably a very good choice, assuming that you're handling the pull well, right? You're not just dying and releasing every 5 seconds and like handling the pull like that. Everyone in the group is handling the pull well. Crusade would be a very good option for that. Crusade can also be a good option on if your bosses, or if you're not getting a second use of your Avenging Wrath Might, of your regular Avenging Wrath 1 minute. If you're not getting 2 uses of that on bosses, then, or at least mostly 2 uses of it, you'd have to get at least some part of your second use in. You could argue that Crusade would be better for those bosses that you're only getting 1 use in. Now, once you get to higher keys, that's not going to be the case. Even on Fortified, bosses are going to take more than a minute typically. Not always a ton more than a minute, but usually more than a minute. But if you're finding yourself, if you're doing 16s and you're finding that the bosses are taking 1 minute and you want to do more boss damage, that's an opportunity for you to use Crusade in a very unique way. Now, of course, again, you're going to want to have really big pulls to make it worth not having a cooldown for every pull. Because where Avenging Wrath Might becomes better is you have it for every single pull, essentially. Depending on your Mythic Plus, what level you're at, what level your teammates are at, what level your pickup group is at, you're going to have Might for basically every pull, more or less, right? There will be occasions where you're not, but if you're killing stuff too fast, if you go up higher in key, then eventually you'll get to the point where you're having it up for every single pull, and having it up for every single pull is actually better than having Crusade for like 1 pull. And where that changes is if you're doing a gigantic pull, Crusade can actually pull ahead there. And so Mythic Plus is an opportunity to use Crusade, but it's extremely niche, and you want to make sure that you're getting the best value out of it. You want to kind of know ahead of time, like I said, the boss timings are going to be. If you're killing the boss in 1:30, for example, then Avenging Wrath Might is much better. If you're killing the boss in 1 minute, then Crusade's a little bit better there. So it really depends on the size of pulls. It depends on how long your bosses are taking. If bosses are really quick because maybe you're doing 16s, maybe you're over-geared for them. Maybe you're doing 10s and you're over-geared for them. Anything you're over-geared for, Crusade definitely has even more of a chance to be good, except for the fact that if you're over-geared for the trash, you're going to be killing the trash so fast that you're going to get 1 Crusade, and then you're going to be doing like multiple trash packs without any cooldowns. Again, unless you pull them all together and do it into 1 giant pull. So yeah, in PvP, you're seeing it because it is just it's more damage per 1 use, right? 1 use of Crusade is more damage than 1 use of Might. So again, if all of your damage is into 1 pull, Crusade will be a little bit better. If you're doing things normally in any normal way, Might's better. And that's why you're going to see pretty much everybody running Might for everything. I would be very interested, the examples I gave just are not things that are realistic, right? All bosses taking, all the bosses in the dungeon taking a minute or less, and then also doing a gigantic pull at the start with Heroism or Bloodlust, and then having Crusade for that. It's just not a super realistic thing that's happening in the game right now. Like, that's not just how it works. But those are kind of the only ways to make Crusade kind of a viable thing, and there's kind of an issue with it. So I don't know if they're going to eventually just drop this. I think this could also just be you just make Avenging Wrath right here, Avenging Wrath Might. You can just get rid of Crusade. I know some people would be against that because they kind of like Crusade as a talent. And then you could actually just put a different throughput talent here, right? Maybe a talent that increases haste while you have it up, giving you part of the Crusade or something without the stacks or something, like increases your haste while you have Avenging Wrath active. Could be like a throughput talent here as they put that there, because this, as of right now, this choice node is not a real choice. It's a choice in extremely niche situations. Like I said, if a boss is going to take, especially like for whatever reason, if they designed a boss where on pull the boss takes way more damage than normal, and that first 30 seconds of the fight is by far the most important 30 seconds of the fight, and you're popping bloodlust on pull and everything, and like I said, the very beginning is the most important part. It's the only part that matters. Then that's like a extremely niche case. Yes, I would then use Crusade in a raid, but that's like not really something I don't think we've ever seen before. I don't know if we've ever seen a boss that takes increased damage on pull like that. Like during I don't know. There might be a boss where this situation would have come up before, but definitely not on pull. But during the course of a fight, it could still be the case where it would be the play to switch to Crusade. But not to get too in the weeds with it, I just kind of wanted to discuss the differences between the two talents, why one's not being used at all, what could happen to make it be used. Like I said, it would have to just become more powerful to where, and here's where I think it would be interesting, right? Where obviously if you have, in the way it works, right? So you have one on pull, right? And then at one, let's just go by 30s then, because you need, 30 seconds to basically to do your whole cooldown. So at 130, we now have 2-1 in favor of might. At 230, we now have 3-2, right? And then at 330, we now have 4-2. So it switches between being twice as many to only one more. And what I think could be interesting tuning wise is if on a fight where it was only one more, where you only got one more might, that the Crusade pulls ahead of it, and it's better to use Crusade. But then on fights where it's two more, which are going to be fights that end in like odd number 30, so 330, 530, 730, on those fights, the might would be better, and on other fights, Crusade would be better. That could be an interesting way to do it tuning. I'm not necessarily in favor of it or not. I kind of like the 1 minute build. If I'm just being completely honest, I kind of like the 1 minute build personally. And my solution would be to, at this point, at least, get rid of Crusade, at least as we know it. Maybe just change this talent to be still named Crusade, but have it just increase haste, increase mastery, increase something during your wings, and it's called Crusade. Increase, other things too. Maybe it increases, instead of giving you this full giant haste buff, maybe it gives you some haste and also gives you some like movement speed or something. So you run faster while you have your wings up as well. I think there's some interesting things they could do there, but it definitely would involve redesigning it. Having the 1 minute cooldown, the issue before is if you have the 1 minute cooldown is if it's not strong, then you're just never going to take it. If this is super weak 1 minute cooldown, you can't take it. And they didn't want that, so they made it be fairly strong. And by making it fairly strong and having Crusade be not giga strong, you're kind of locked into this 1 minute thing, at least in PvE. So that's it for this one. Hopefully I did a decent job explaining this talent. You can, if you have any other ideas on what you would do with this talent node, or what you would do with Crusade going forward, feel free to drop those below. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.